First, I would like to thank also Heike for inviting me there and to give me the opportunity to talk about my work at François Rabelais University in the Loire Valley in France. The title of the talk is also the title of a book that has been published this year by a scientific editor. And the book is based, and this talk also is based, on a paper that has also been published this year by Earth Science Reviews, and also another paper that has been published 2 years ago. And there was a book in French, a companion book in French, The Innocence of Carbon. What is a skate? You know well today, more than 80% of energy is produced by burning fossil fuels. I will not discuss until when we can continue like that, but I will just address today what is improperly called the greenhouse effect. Improperly called the greenhouse effect on climate. Of course, because it is related to this long saga of COP conferences. It has been already told today, in air, most highest concentrated gases in air do not absorb heat. This was shown by Tyndall long time ago. Doesn't absorb heat. Only trace gas absorb heat. This is related to what we call the dipole moment created by the difference of electron activity of atoms in molecules. If there is a single atom, there is no difference, and therefore no absorption. If there is a difference, you see the most absorbing is, well, it disappeared, I don't know why. But anyway, it's water vapor in air, not only because the value is the highest, but also because it is the most concentrated in air. So this is by far the most efficient, improperly called greenhouse gas. Second one is CO2, and CO2 concentration is only 0.04% in air, but it has increased, at least partly due to the burning of fossil fuels, from 0.03 to 0.04 in 1 century. This increase has been already shown by previous speakers. Other with much lower concentrations are CH4, but you see the concentration is extremely low, and nitrogen oxide also, but with still lower concentration in air. There has been in Kigali, an agreement about another one, HFC, but you see the concentration in air is ridiculous. So we will only talk about CO2 because there has been an increase. In addition, for CH4, you see concentration in air has doubled during the 20th century, but now seems to have an asymptotic behavior. So doesn't decrease, at least not much. Who emits CO2? Everybody. Everybody, but a special situation in China, which has considerably increased their emissions, and they confess they will continue till 2030. The second is United States, but you see it's slightly declining now. Europa is blue in this picture, and we see Europa also decline slightly. But India and other countries increase. The problem of possible or not possible correlation between Earth's temperature and CO2 has been addressed by previous speaker already. I propose here a very simple point of view. The temperature in black is given by the British Hadley Centre. It is complemented by the red section, which is temperature given by satellite measurements. They agree each other. You see, you see recently the big peak related to the 2016 El Nino. There have been two increases during the 20th century. One from 1910 to 1940, and the second one. During the first increase, you see that the CO2 emissions were low, 6 times lower than during the second increase. And both increases, you see, have exactly the same amplitude during the same time, 30 years. So there is no evidence of a correlation. In addition, between 1945 and 1975, there has been a decline of temperature, while CO2 emissions were accelerating. Again, there is no correlation at all. Since the beginning of this acceleration of emissions, there has been an increase of 0.4 degrees Celsius. 0.4 degrees Celsius. It is a temperature increase every quarter of an hour by a beautiful sunny day in the Loire Valley. And you know what? We survive. The best way, at least a good way, to understand this evolution is just to fit with a 60-year cycle. In addition to this cycle, you have to increase the straight line, and the slope is 0.006 degrees per year. But you see, this straight line is not correlated to the change of emissions, since there is an acceleration after 1945. Or you can fit with a straight line plus. So maybe there is a partial contributions, as shown by the previous speaker, but no, not all I mean is explained. There are other sentinels of climate which do confirm this cycle. In the upper curve, I've just reproduced figure 3.14 of IPCC 5 report. This gives the sea level rise after this is a combination of many papers about the subject, and IPCC gives this result. I've asked my computer, please give me a cycle that best fit the sea level rise. Well, it did. And this is exactly the same period as the 60-year cycle. So, I mean, possibly you can tell that there is an acceleration, recent acceleration of sea level rise. Why not? This just fits the 60-year cycle. In the middle part of the figure, I've just added the global ice Erie anomaly as given by satellite measurements. So that's why we have only a short range of data since the beginning of photographs taken by satellites. And you see, well, I will not say it fits a 60-year cycle because we have only half a period. This is too short. But anyway, it's consistent with a 60-year cycle. And of course, when it's colder, there is more ice, and when it's warmer, there is less ice. We will see in the future if it continues to be consistent. By the way, the sea level rise, if we take the average of this cycle, the sea level rise at the end of this century will be the eighth of this beautiful object I've added. This is not a scoop. I mean, here is a number of papers published in peer-reviewed literature that shows this 60-year cycle has been already addressed. The first one related this cycle to the Atlantic multidecadal oscillations, but in the audience we have also Dr. Nicolas Cafetta, which possibly relate this cycle to planetary tides of sun. That's very interesting. You know, the moon is responsible for the tides. Similarly, we could imagine that big planets and conjunction or not of big planets could play a role about the tides of the sun, which is gaseous. In addition to this cycle, there is other possible cycles that will be addressed tomorrow by Professor Lüdecke. In particular, he confirmed this 60-year cycle, plus, say, 2 50-year cycles. And we see that the tangent to the recent ascending part will be consistent with the straight line we have to add to the 60-year cycle. What says IPCC? They predict temperature for the end of this century intermediate between 0.3 degrees and 4.8 degrees. That means an uncertainty of 1,060%. That's useful. And they are confident of this uncertainty since they are confident at 95% in this uncertainty. Useful. Inside the report, there is this figure that shows that they think that likely that lower values, they are more likely lower values. But this is not reproduced in the summary for policymakers. Catastrophic anthropogenic global warming is predicted by models. Are models validated by observations? No. Not during the last century. For example, between 1910 and 1945, as we have seen a few slides ago, the models miss completely the first ascending part of the first cycle. They fit the second, okay, but they miss the first one. So they are not validated. It's even worse since the beginning of this century, since you see, again, this is a picture taken from the AR5 report. You see, all models run too hot. All models run too hot. That means they rule out each other. In other terms, they are all wrong. And to take the average of wrong results is unuseful or even meaningless. Another picture taken from the AR5 report, another way to show the same thing. Measurements is in red. This is the measurements from the British Adley Center. And models give temperature that are 2 to 10 times too hot. 2 to 10 times too hot. That means that climate alarmism is not validated by observations. This is video game alarmism, I mean. And this is especially interesting since 1998 addressed in the picture of the report, 1/3 of all the CO2 emissions have been sent in the air. 1/3, with practically no effect on temperature. Only models claim that it will run hot. So, IPCC definitely has a problem. How to solve the problem? They have concluded that they recognize the pause, the plateau, okay, of temperature, and they try to convince us that heat would have been heated in the oceans. Interesting. So let's have a look on the heat, if it is hidden in the oceans. For that, we will use the most recent paper that addressed these questions by Wunsch and Heimat, and they are from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and they have published a very interesting paper because first they consider the heat until abyssal depths, and this is the first one that does that, and also they use the most recent observations by Argo buoys. You know, there are 3,000 captors that are spread on all the oceans in the world, 3,000, which measure temperature and salinity. Using this data, they found an oceanic radiative forcing, which is less than previous papers. You see that there is a kind of decline versus year of publication. What they found? They found an enormous heat. But if you divide the heat, as they does in the paper, by the heat capacities of water, you find an increase of temperature of 0.0004 degrees Celsius per year. Okay, so that means they conclude, no, it's too low to be sure of that, to confirm the conjecture, because even with Argo buoys, we are not accurate enough to tell that with such a so low increase of temperature, this is, but because, of course, Argo buoys measure temperature from which they deduce heat content in the oceans. But they conclude the uncertainties in all the field remains too large to rationalize, for example, the pause in warming. In addition, there is this average, very, very, very small increase is very different from one basin to another one. And there is no reason that anthropogenic global warming will choose a special basin in one ocean. How works those models? Today has been addressed in various talks the effects of aerosols. This is an ingredient in the climate model, and this is a cooling effect, as has been, we have heard from the example, for example, of Tambora. This is a cooling effect with this year without summer. Here is a paper published in 1971 by a famous climatologist, Schneider. And at that time, Earth was cooling. So the models predicted even more cooling. They have two knobs, aerosols, of course, and for warming, climate sensitivity, that is. increase of temperatures in case of CO2 doubling in the atmosphere. And then there are two interesting points in this paper. First, they have a climate sensitivity of 0.8 degrees. 0.8 degrees. So low one. And they had the runaway greenhouse effect doesn't occur because the CO2 bond, which is the main source of absorption, saturates. That's very interesting. Then temperature increases. And therefore, there change tuning of cooling and warming buttons, knobs, and they increase the climate sensitivity to an average value of 3 degrees Celsius, with an uncertainty from 1979, the Charney report, uncertainty is the same, from 1.5 to 4.5 degrees. And then we have the pause that IPCC R5 recognize. And therefore, tendency for published values of climate sensitivity is cooling of climate sensitivity. So that's very interesting, this review we have already seen in another talk, because that is called to be a consensus. There is a consensus of scientists. But between the highest value and the lowest value, there is, say, the same difference of weight between a man of my weight and a 6 months baby. Same ratio, more than the factor of 10. So there are two definitions of the climate sensitivity, the one at the equilibrium, ECS, and the one, the transient value. Both are cooling. What will cooling, well, a regression by just a straight line give a decrease of 10% per year. So that means COP22, COP32, 0, if we extrapolate. Of course, the reason is that since climatologists have noticed that models run too hot, they tend to decrease, of course, the alarmism. What is called the improperly called greenhouse effect, since Schneider said it saturates, what does that mean? This is infrared spectrum of air, a few tenths of meter of altitude of air, and you see there are many absorption bands. Practically all are from water vapor, and there are two that are related to CO2. I found this beautiful lady with two young men. Beautiful lady is carbon. Young men are oxygen. There are two possibilities. Either the lady is unable to choose, and they kiss left, she kissed right, she kissed left, she kissed right, and so on, at the frequency of 1,000 billion of oscillations per second time, 20 for one and 70 for the other. Or she cannot choose, and she simply do that. She cannot choose. This is the second oscillation. Both those oscillations for a few tens meter of altitude of air are completely, air is completely absorbing. Okay? That means molecules above a few 10 meters cannot see the radiation emitted by the Earth. It's already absorbed. Okay? That means we recover why Schneider told this is saturated. It has been already shown by Ångström in beginning of the 19th century. To be sure, anyway, we can put a satellite above the height of the atmosphere and measure what CO2 emit, or what Earth is able to emit. This is very small. This is not zero, but this is very small and gives something which is 2.2 watt per square meter, which will give, at the end of this century, an anthropogenic contribution of 0.2 degrees. Another way to check is to look at the temperature not in the low troposphere, but in the low stratosphere. I just have copied what is written in the IPCC report. These substances emit infrared radiation in all directions, but the net amount emitted to space is normally less than would have been emitted in the absence of these absorbers because of the decline of temperature with altitude. So, satellite measurements are able to tell us what the change in the low stratosphere, and you see the change is zero. Again, the theory is not validated by the experiment. And this concerns a measurement since 1993. I started there before there were volcanic eruptions that changed the situation dramatically. So after the last important volcanic eruption, measurement shows nothing. The theory, for example, I take a paper from Sloan and Wolfendale. They predict for this change of CO2 concentration a shift of 2.4 degrees, easy to measure, not found. Conversely, if the climate sensitivity will be 0.6 degrees or lower, as published by Herman Harder, then it will be consistent with the measurements. The reason why is that the absorptivity of the CO2 bonds, even above 11 kilometers, absorptivity is still nearly 100%. And therefore, the temperature of the atmosphere declines with altitude until 11 kilometers, but above it stays as constant and even increases a little bit. Therefore, the theory which invokes a decline of emission is not validated even above, at least is not validated above 11 kilometers. Chaos dominate climate. This has been published by the American Meteorological Bureau 1 month ago, and shows how climate models are unable to predict anything. This is the same model with the same equations, exactly same parameters, just changing initial conditions by very few quantity. You see, the predictions of climate, they are all completely different. And that fits the theory by Edward Lorenz, published 40 years ago. And of course, there is no CO2 change in this model. This is the same model with the same CO2 concentration, okay? And it gives completely different climates. So, what is nice, I will say? And that is forgotten, I'm afraid, especially by those who pretend themselves to be green, is that CO2 is the food of vegetation, okay? By this chemistry, very simple. That's why in a true greenhouse, if you change the concentration of CO2, as has been done here by Craig Itzo, you see it improves the growth of a given plant. It has been verified by for many plants. This is just an example. Crops. There is crop yields, especially for nutritive vegetation, nutritive plants like corn, wheat, rice, and of course this is very good for humanity, especially for poor people. In addition, you have seen the increase of CO2 shows an oscillation, a seasonal oscillation. But the amplitude of this oscillation is not the same everywhere on the Earth. If you measure it in Antarctica, there are practically no amplitude of oscillations because there is no vegetation in Antarctica. Conversely, in California, example of La Jolla, there is an amplitude which is much larger. That means that for spring and summer, the vegetation wants more CO2, and the CO2 decreases in the atmosphere, at least in the northern hemisphere, of course. The amplitude, let's have a look on the change of this amplitude versus time. This is shown here. Actually, the increase of this drop, seasonal drop, has been 71% larger than the increase of CO2 in the same time. That means vegetation was starving. And vegetations, especially nutritive plants, like CO2. You see on the right curve the increase of crop yield. This has been evaluated by Craig Ilso as a benefit for humanity of $3,000 billion since 1971. And it has been also published this year in Nature. This is the equivalent of a 6 green continent of 18 million of square kilometers. 18 million of square kilometers, this is more than 4 times the area of the European Union. So, it's good, isn't it? Earth is growing greener. Climate does change, with alternating periods of warming and cooling every 30 years. The anthropogenic contribution to climate change appears well below dangerous levels, consistent with infrared studies of greenhouse gas absorptions and latest published climate sensitivity. The balance tilts in favor of the gas of life, since moderate warming favors human well-being, growth, and progress. Thank you for your attention.